Dad, how much longer before we get there? Today we talk about that age-old traveling question, are we there yet? Well, I want to talk about that question, are we there yet? And put it in a little bit of a different way when it comes to recovery, because I get asked this question lots of different times in different ways. And the question is, how much longer will it be before I am over this struggle with porn? It's a great question. I'm not sure you're going to like my final answer, but to introduce that question, let me just talk about a term that some people like, some people hate, and some people are not sure about, and that's the term addict. Because that kind of is around this question of can we get past being an addict, or is that just a stage, or are we there yet? When are we going to be over this? And some people hate the word addict because it feels too terminal. Like there's no hope for change. You're never going to be over this. It's a life sentence. Once an addict, always an addict. Some people hate the term addict because they think it kind of hits them at the core of their identity. They'd choose, they want to put something more hopeful in the place of their identity. For example, Christians will talk about being a child of God who struggles with porn. So that might be a reason why you don't like that term. I kind of fall somewhere, between the two terms of hating it and loving the term. I like the way that my pirate friend Nate Larkin puts it. He describes himself as a recovering porn addict. And that has an element of hope and change, but it also has an element of humility and what is really taken place and what still goes on, I guess. And whatever term you want to use, there is an interesting question as to why some people who apparently struggle with something that looks like an addiction, they're able just to let it go, drop it, put it aside, and move on. For example, I had a friend who struggled with gambling, and things kind of hit the wall with his marriage, and I told him he needed to go to a gambling anonymous group. But he told me, hey, it's not an addiction. I don't need to go, and I'll just stop. And from what I can tell, apparently he did. He just stopped. Another friend of mine was a problem drinker in their 20s. They loved whiskey. And, but when they started a relationship, that guy decided, this isn't going to serve me well. And he just stopped drinking. Apparently, I think he's now close to 40. He doesn't drink anymore. So, was that an addiction? He just stopped it. I know some people who realized, I think I have a problem and I shouldn't look at porn. And so they apparently just said, I'm done. They stopped it and they don't have that a part of their life anymore. Doesn't plague them anymore. And it raises a really interesting question. Were they ever really addicts in the first place? If quitting was part of their ability, maybe they weren't addicts. I mean, after all, isn't the definition of an addict someone who has unsuccessfully tried to quit over and over again? So maybe we should fine-tune the question. If you struggle with porn as an addiction, how long will it be before you are over this struggle with porn? So now I'm doing kind of narrowing it down to people who would see this as a real addictive struggle. One of the ways I answer that question, are we there yet, or how long is it going to be before we get there? One of the ways I always like usually answering a question with a question is, well, how long have you been developing this addictive struggle for? And if the answer is 2 months, well, that might lead to one thing. If the answer is 20 years, well, that might lead to a very different conclusion. If you have been looking at porn for 20, 25 years, it's probably unrealistic to think that you can change in a month or two just by an act of willpower. Okay, fair enough, but how long? How long is it before, if porn has been an addictive struggle in my life, before I can remove its escalating and harmful effects from my life and just stop doing it? And I guess if I was really pressed to make a quick answer, it would be, well, I would say for most guys, 2 to 3 years is what it usually takes if they're willing to put sustained effort into it. Yeah, I knew some of you go, oh my goodness, and I've scared you away. You're going, oh, come on. You can't take that long. But here's my point. You're probably, if you've been working on developing this problem for a long time, from my experience, it's going to take you a significant amount of time and the work you need to do to create a new trajectory for your life. And by sustained effort, I don't just mean willpower. I mean taking the steps around learning and building relationships and becoming brutally honest with yourself and other people. All of that is something that I would put in the area of what I call sustained effort. But if that answer was discouraging for you, let me even make it worse and really upset you. I would say this: if you struggle with a deep susceptibility to porn, you will never probably experience an effort-free version of your life where you simply live with clear sailing. You go, oh my goodness, now I'm really upset. Now I'm really discouraged. And I want to explain that discouraging statement. Let me say that statement again. If porn is been a part of your addictive makeup, you're never going to get to a place of complete clear sailing. Now, to make a point, let me go to, me and my wife did marriage education for 15 years with couples. And I want to bring in one of the marriage gurus, John Gottman, and I want to talk about one of the approaches he used to working with couples who were having problems. And what he says is this: couple problems, they usually break down into 2 categories. The first category is solvable problems. Those are problems that are experienced as a couple, where the couple takes clear steps, they problem solve, they take clear steps to overcome them, and then those problems are over and done with. It's clear cut, over and done with, and we're kind of all hoping that our porn struggles are part of that category, solvable problems. But John Gottman goes on to say this. He says there's a second type of problem, and it actually makes up, believe it or not, the majority of the types of problems that couples experience. And he describes the second category as perpetual problems. These are ongoing issues that arise from the fact that each person is very deeply different from one another, with different values, with different personalities, with the way they approach life. And he says those deep differences cause perpetual challenges or problems that are never going to go away. And the goal for those types of problems, perpetual problems, is to resolve them. Now, what does he mean by resolve them? And what he means by that is learning to manage them in a way that works for the two of you, and you learn to be successful despite the fact that those problems never completely disappear from your life. Yeah, again, I understand that sounds depressing, but it actually is very freeing to couples, because what they do is they quit all these unsuccessful attempts to change the other person so that the problem would go away. They learn to, in one sense, accept that these are our deep differences. They learn to come up with solutions and strategies so that they can manage them. Let me apply that to porn, for example. Yes, I would like it to be a solvable problem. It goes away and never enters my life again. It never even bothers me again. And I know many of you are still looking for that silver bullet 10, 20 years into recovery where it basically doesn't even have any appeal to you anymore, and maybe there's people like that. I haven't really met any of them. Instead, I would say this: it's better to see it as a perpetual problem, something that you can manage and resolve in a way that doesn't take you out, that you can learn to grow through, and you can learn to develop strategies to deal with. So let me give you an example of this one. What do I mean in the real life? So the example I want to give you is, for example, someone who struggles with type 1 diabetes. Now that's, of course, the worst kind. And this is the type of diabetes that requires daily insulin shots. Did a quick Google search and it told me this: most people with diabetes need at least 2 insulin shots a day. I can't imagine. Some people need 3 to 4 shots for good blood sugar control. Again, that's just totally, I can't imagine having to deal with that on a daily basis. You say, okay, well, maybe they shouldn't take it. Well, what would happen to a person who is type 1 diabetic who doesn't take their insulin? Well, quick Google search, and this is what it says. The risk for people with type 1 diabetes for not taking their insulin is quick death from DKA. That's insulin deficiency exacerbated by illness, stress, dehydration. It only takes days to progress, and it is worsening over a day or 2 or 3. So it gives you a week or so, plus or minus, maybe on the outside 2 weeks before you're dead. And you go, wow, no wonder a diabetic is willing to put a needle in their arm once or twice a day. I can't imagine that, but, for a diabetic, that is what they need every day to manage their illness. So let's say, for example, I am a type 1 porn addict. What do I mean by that? Well, I have repeatedly and unsuccessfully tried to stop on my own. I have developed porn as a best friend, as an overarching medicine for all the various emotional triggers in my life. It's embedded itself in a way that has had escalating and negative effects on my life. I am a type 1 diabetic. I am a type 1 porn addict, for example. I would say that in general, I think that's an accurate summary of me, and probably most of you if you're listening to this. Even today, having been not looking at porn for 4+ years now, I would say this: rarely a day or two goes by where I don't still think of acting out. Most days there's 10-15% part of my brain that still seems to be looking for an opportunity to find porn. Just one last glance for old time's sake. Again, I'm just being honest with you, that I think still is a part of my reality. So what do I need to do as a type 1 porn addict, a recovering porn addict, right? Well, I need to go into my medicine cabinet once or twice a day and get out my insulin and my needle. You say, oh, okay. So what kind of insulin are we talking about here? Well, these are some examples of insulin in my life. I have to get up every morning and reconnect spiritually with God. I have to get up and every morning, am I still a child of God? Does he still have a plan for my life? So many mornings I get up, and we used to have a fireplace, and the old days you would mostly heat your house on wood. But imagine yourself getting up in the morning and all you had was wood, and you put the fire, all the logs on the fire the night before. You get up in the morning and all there is, it looks dead, but you get out the poker and you poke around in the fireplace, and there's still a few coals there, and you kind of, poke them back into life, and you put some kindling on them, and you get that fire going again. I can't tell you how many days it feels like that in my spiritual life. I need to, get that fire going and throw some wood on the fire. So that for me, does God still have a plan for me? That doesn't involve porn. Well, every day I kind of need to ask myself that question. Well, the next vial of insulin I need is I usually listen to a good podcast every day. So I know God still would desire this part of my life, but do I really want to continue this road of recovery? And some days, I'm not so sure. And as I listen to a good podcast, whether it's Porn Free Radio, Pure Sex Radio, Restored to More, Pirate Monk Podcast, Pure Desire, Finding Traction, whatever it is. I don't know about that Finding Traction guy, but the other guys are okay. I would say this: it helps me get my head, my will, my emotions back in the game. It's an insulin shot for my day. Yes, that's still what I want for my day. And then maybe the third vial of insulin that I take is reconnecting and intentionally connecting with life-giving relationships. Sometimes it's giving to somebody who's in trouble or reaching out to somebody. Sometimes it's receiving, getting help and support from other people. And all of that gets me through another day. So, can I go a day without insulin? Yeah, sure. Can I go 2? Well, at that point, I'm starting to feel a little bit unsteady on my feet, or, wobbly, as I put it on an earlier podcast. Maybe this podcast doesn't feel nearly victorious enough for you, and this episode especially. Maybe it sounds like I'm feeling a lot more tenuous than you'd like, or struggling than you'd like. But personally, I guess I would rather practice intentional steps of humility than experience some sort of bravado that leads me in an area where I put myself in a vulnerable situation. Interesting, the Apostle Paul, he talks about the verse that he talks about escaping temptations or triggers, but the verse that precedes that is this: beware of those who think you stand, lest you fall. And there was somebody else who had a thorn in the flesh that I know kept him aware of his daily weaknesses. So maybe I am not in such bad company. So next time you are tempted to ask, are we there yet? I truly believe that life and joy and victory are possible. But it's not a version of clear sailing that doesn't leave you in deep need of God and other people each and every day. That means you don't still have to practice taking your insulin. And so in one sense, we're already there. Yes, we've got there. There just looks a little different than what we might have anticipated. So the next time, God bless you. It's great chatting with you. We'll see you on the next episode.